in the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as the exiles lived by the river Chebar, the heavens were opened and visions were seen. The hand of the Creator was strong upon the one who stood among the captives, a priest in the land of the Chaldeans. As the eyes looked toward the north, a whirlwind came out of the distance, a great cloud and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. Out of the midst of the fire came the likeness of 4 living creatures. Their appearance was that of a man, yet each had 4 faces, and each had 4 wings. Their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. Under their wings on their 4 sides were the hands of a man, and the wings of one were joined to the wings of another. They turned not when they went every one straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man, and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. And they went every one straight forward, whither the Spirit was to go. They went, and they turned not when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. Now, as the eyes beheld the living creatures, 1 wheel appeared upon the earth by the living creatures, with its 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl. And they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. When they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them 4. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go. And the wheels were lifted up over against them. For the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them. For the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. Likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature was as the color of the terrible crystal, stretched forth over their heads above. And under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other. Every one had 2, which covered on this side, and every one had 2, which covered on that side their bodies. And when they went, the noise of their wings was like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of an host. When they stood, they let down their wings, and there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and had let down their wings. Above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. The appearance of the loins even upward, and from the appearance of the loins even downward, was as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within it. It had brightness round about, as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Creator. And when it was seen, the observer fell upon his face, and the voice of one that spoke was heard. The voice said, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak unto thee. And the Spirit entered into the man when he spoke, and set him upon his feet. The voice continued, saying that the man was being sent to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against the ancient ways. They and their fathers have transgressed, even unto this very day. They are impudent children and stiff-hearted. The command was given to go unto them and say, Thus saith the Lord, whether they will hear, or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house. Yet shall they know that there has been a prophet among them. The man was told not to be afraid of them, nor to be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns be with him, and though he dwell among scorpions. He was not to be afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks. He was to speak the words unto them, whether they would hear or forbear. But he was told, Son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth, and eat that I give thee. And when the eyes looked, a hand was sent, and a roll of a book was therein. It was spread before him, and it was written within and without, and there was written therein lamentations, and mourning, and woe. The voice spoke again, Son of man, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, and go speak unto the house of Israel. So the mouth was opened, and he caused him to eat that roll. It was said, Cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then did he eat it, and it was in the mouth as honey for sweetness. But the contents of the roll were heavy with the weight of judgment. He was told he was not sent to a people of a strange speech and of an hard language, whose words he could not understand. If he had been sent to them, they would have hearkened. But the house of Israel would not hearken, for they would not hearken unto the source. For all the house of Israel are impudent and hard-hearted. The face of the man was made strong against their faces, and his forehead strong against their foreheads. As an adamant harder than flint was his forehead made. He was not to fear them, nor be dismayed at their looks. Moreover, the voice said, All my words that I shall speak unto thee receive in thine heart, and hear with thine ears. And go, get thee to them of the captivity, unto the children of thy people, and speak unto them, and tell them. Then the Spirit took him up, and he heard behind him a voice of a great rushing, saying, Blessed be the glory of the Lord from his place. He heard also the noise of the wings of the living creatures that touched one another, and the noise of the wheels over against them, and a noise of a great rushing. The Spirit lifted the man up and took him away, and he went in bitterness and in the heat of his spirit, for the hand of the Creator was strong upon him. He came to them of the captivity at Tel Abib, who dwelt by the river Chebar, and he sat where they sat, remaining there astonished among them for 7 days. It was a silence born of the weight of the vision, a stillness that preceded the speaking of the word. At the end of the 7 days, the word came again, saying that the man had been made a watchman unto the house of Israel. He was to hear the word and give them warning. If the word was spoken to the wicked, thou shalt surely die, and no warning was given to save his life, that wicked man would die in his iniquity, but his blood would be required at the hand of the watchman. Yet if the wicked was warned and turned not from his wickedness, he would die, but the watchman would have delivered his soul. Likewise, if a righteous man turned from his righteousness and committed iniquity, and a stumbling block was laid before him, he would die because he was not warned. His righteousness would not be remembered, but his blood would be required. But if the righteous man was warned not to sin, and he did not sin, he would surely live, and the soul of the watchman would be delivered. The responsibility was a heavy yoke, a duty to the living and the dead. The hand was upon him again, and he was told to go forth into the plain, where the glory would be shown once more. He went forth into the plain, and behold, the glory stood there, as the glory which was seen by the river Chebar, and he fell on his face. Then the Spirit entered into him, and set him upon his feet, speaking and saying, Go, shut thyself within thine house. He was told that bands would be put upon him, and he would be bound with them, so that he could not go out among the people. His tongue would be made to cleave to the roof of his mouth, that he should be dumb and not be a reprover to them, for they were a rebellious house. But when the time came to speak, the mouth would be opened, and he would say, Thus saith the Lord. He that hears, let him hear, and he that forbears, let him forbear. The man was then commanded to take a tile and lay it before him, and portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem. He was to lay siege against it, and build a fort, and cast a mount, and set the camp also against it, and set battering rams round about. He was to take an iron pan, and set it for a wall of iron between him and the city, and set his face against it, and it should be besieged. This was to be a sign to the house of Israel. Furthermore, he was to lie upon his left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of the days that he should lie upon it. He should bear their iniquity. 390 days were appointed for the years of their iniquity. When those days were accomplished, he was to lie again on his right side, and bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days, each day representing a year. He was to set his face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and his arm was to be uncovered, and he was to prophesy against it. Bands were put upon him, so that he could not turn from one side to another until the days of the siege were ended. He was also told to take wheat, and barley, and beans, and lentils, and millet, and fitches, and put them in one vessel, and make bread thereof. This bread was to be eaten during the days he lay upon his side. The food was to be weighed 20 shekels a day, and the water measured the 1/6 part of an hin. The bread was to be baked with fuel that represented the defilement of the people among the nations. But the man cried out, "Ah, Lord, behold, my soul hath not been polluted, for from my youth up even till now have I not eaten of that which dieth of itself, or is torn in pieces, neither came there abominable flesh into my mouth." Then it was granted that a different fuel, the dung of kine, be used instead. The word was clear. The stay of bread in Jerusalem would be broken, and they should eat bread by weight and with care, and they should drink water by measure and with astonishment. They would want bread and water, and be astonished one with another, and consume away for their iniquity. A sharp knife, even a barber's razor, was to be taken, and the hair of the head and of the beard was to be caused to pass under it. The hair was then to be weighed and divided into parts. A 1/3 part was to be burnt in the fire in the midst of the city when the days of the siege were fulfilled. A 1/3 part was to be taken and smitten about with a knife, and a 1/3 part was to be scattered in the wind, with a sword drawn after them. A small number of the hairs were to be taken and bound in the skirts of the robe. But even of those, some were to be cast into the midst of the fire. For out of it should a fire come forth into all the house of Israel. Thus said the word, "This is Jerusalem. I have set it in the midst of the nations and countries that are round about her." But she had changed the judgments into wickedness more than the nations, and the statutes more than the countries round about. Therefore, the city was to be dealt with in the sight of the nations. Because of all the abominations, things would be done in the city that had never been done before, and the like of which would never be done again. The fathers would eat the sons in the midst of her, and the sons would eat their fathers. The whole remnant would be scattered into all the winds. The eye would not spare, nor would there be any pity. A 1/3 part would die with the pestilence, and with famine in the midst. A 1/3 part would fall by the sword round about, and a 1/3 part would be scattered into all the winds. Thus the anger would be accomplished, and the fury caused to rest. The city would be made waste, and a reproach among the nations, an instruction and an astonishment unto the countries round about. When the evil arrows of famine were sent, which should be for destruction, the stay of bread would be broken. Famine and evil beasts would be sent to bereave the land. Pestilence and blood would pass through, and the sword would be brought upon the people. The word came again, directed toward the mountains of Israel. Ye mountains of Israel, hear the word. Behold, a sword would be brought, and the high places would be destroyed. The altars would be desolate, and the images broken. The slain men would be cast down before the idols. The carcasses of the children of Israel would be laid before their idols, and the bones scattered round about the altars. In all the dwelling places, the cities would be laid waste, and the high places made desolate, that the altars might be laid waste and made desolate, and the idols broken and cease. The works would be abolished, and the slain would fall in the midst, and it would be known that the word is truth. Yet a remnant would be left, those who should escape the sword among the nations. They that escaped would remember the source among the nations, whither they should be carried captives, because of the broken heart and the eyes that went after idols. They would loathe themselves for the evils they had committed in all their abominations. They would know that the word was not spoken in vain. The command was given to smite with the hand and stamp with the foot, and say, "Alas for all the evil abominations of the house of Israel, for they should fall by the sword, by the famine, and by the pestilence. He that is far off shall die of the pestilence, and he that is near shall fall by the sword." The word came again, marking the arrival of the end upon the four corners of the land. The time had come for the spirit of the vision to be poured out, and the judgments were to be rendered according to the ways of the people. No eye would spare, and no pity would be found, for the abominations that were committed in the midst of the city would now be repaid. It was a day of trouble, and not of the echoing of joy upon the mountains. The fury was to be accomplished, and the rod of pride had blossomed into a harvest of violence. None of the people would remain, nor of their multitude, nor of any of theirs. There would be no wailing for them, for the wrath was upon all the world they had built. The buyer was told not to rejoice, and the seller not to mourn, for the vision was touching the whole multitude. The seller would not return to that which was sold, even if they were yet alive, for the iniquity had strengthened no man in the life of his soul. They had blown the trumpet and made all ready, but none went to the battle. The sword was without, and the pestilence, and the famine within. He that was in the field would die by the sword, and he that was in the city would be devoured by hunger. But they that escaped would be on the mountains like doves of the valleys, all of them mourning, every one for his iniquity. All hands would be feeble, and all knees would be weak as water. They would gird themselves with sackcloth, and horror would cover them. Shame would be upon all faces, and baldness upon all their heads. They would cast their silver in the streets, and their gold would be removed like an unclean thing. Their silver and their gold would not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath. It would not satisfy their souls, nor fill their bowels, because it had been the stumbling block of their iniquity. As for the beauty of the ornaments, which had been set in majesty, they had made the images of their abominations and of their detestable things therein. Therefore, the very things they prized would be given into the hands of the strangers for a prey, and to the wicked of the earth for a spoil. The face was to be turned away from the sanctuary, and the secret place would be polluted. The robbers would enter into it and defile it. A chain was to be made, for the land was full of bloody crimes, and the city was full of violence. The worst of the nations would be brought to possess the houses, and the pomp of the strong would be made to cease. Destruction was coming, and they would seek peace, but there would be none. Mischief would come upon mischief, and rumor upon rumor. Then would they seek a vision of the prophet, but the law would perish from the priest, and counsel from the ancients. The king would mourn, and the prince would be clothed with desolation, for they would be judged according to their own deserts. In the 6th year, in the 6th month, in the 5th day of the month, as the man sat in his house, and the elders of Judah sat before him, the hand of the Creator fell there upon him. He beheld a likeness as the appearance of fire, from the appearance of his loins even downward, fire, and from his loins even upward, as the appearance of brightness, as the color of amber. A hand was put forth, taking him by a lock of the head, and the Spirit lifted him up between the earth and the heaven. In the visions, he was brought to Jerusalem, to the door of the inner gate that looks toward the north, where there was the seat of the image of jealousy. And behold, the glory of the Creator was there, according to the vision seen in the plain. The voice said, Son of man, lift up thine eyes now the way toward the north. So the eyes were lifted, and behold, northward at the gate of the altar was the image of jealousy in the entry. He was asked if he saw the great abominations that the house of Israel committed there, that the presence should go far off from the sanctuary. But he was told he would see even greater things. He was brought to the door of the court, and when he looked, a hole was in the wall. He was told to dig in the wall, and when he had digged, there was a door. Go in, the voice said, and behold the wicked abominations that they do here. He went in and saw every form of creeping things, and abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about. And there stood before them 70 men of the ancients of the house of Israel, and in the midst of them stood Jozaniah the son of Shaphan, with every man his censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. Then he was asked, Son of man, hast thou seen what the ancients of the house of Israel do in the dark, every man in the chambers of his imagery? For they said, The Lord seeth us not, the Lord hath forsaken the earth. He was told again that he would see greater abominations. He was brought to the door of the gate, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Then he was brought into the inner court, and at the door of the temple, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs toward the temple and their faces toward the east, and they worshipped the sun toward the east. The voice asked, Is it a light thing to the house of Judah that they commit the abominations which they commit here? For they have filled the land with violence, and have returned to provoke me to anger. Therefore, the judgment would be dealt in fury, the eye would not spare, nor would there be any pity. Then a loud voice cried in the ears, Cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, even every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. They went in and stood beside the brass altar. The glory was gone up from the cherub to the threshold of the house. The man in linen was called and told to go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. To the others the voice said in the hearing, Go ye after him through the city, and smite. Let not your eye spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women. But come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. The house was defiled, and the courts filled with the slain. As they were slaying, the observer was left alone and fell upon his face, crying out, Ah, Lord God, wilt thou destroy all the residue of Israel in thy pouring out of thy fury upon Jerusalem? The answer was that the iniquity was exceeding great, for they said the earth was forsaken. The man clothed with linen returned and reported that he had done as he was commanded. Then the vision showed the firmament above the head of the cherubims, appearing like a sapphire stone, as the likeness of a throne. The man in linen was told to go in between the wheels, even under the cherub, and fill his hand with coals of fire from between the cherubims, and scatter them over the city. As he went in, a cherub stretched forth his hand from between the cherubims unto the fire, and took thereof, and put it into the hands of him that was clothed with linen, who took it and went out. The glory of the house was departing, moving toward the threshold, as the sound of the wings was heard even to the outer court. The vision of the wheels and the living creatures remained, a constant and moving presence that stood over the threshold of the house. The glory was lifted up from the city and stood upon the mountain, which is on the east side of the valley. The man in linen took the coals of fire and went out, and the noise of the wings of the cherubims was like the voice of the Almighty when he speaks. Every cherub had 4 faces. The first face was the face of a cherub, the second was the face of a man, the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle. They were the same living creatures that were seen by the river Chebar, and their wheels were full of eyes round about, moving with the Spirit as one. The Spirit then lifted the man up and brought him unto the east gate of the house, which looks toward the sun. And behold, at the door of the gate were 25 men. Among them were Jazaniah the son of Azar, and Pelasha the son of Benaiah, princes of the people. The voice said, Son of man, these are the men that devise mischief and give wicked counsel in this city. They were those who said that the time of building was not near, and that the city was the cauldron, and they were the flesh within it, thinking themselves safe behind the walls of stone. Therefore, a prophecy was given against them, for they had multiplied their slain in the streets and filled the places with the fallen. The word was clear. The city would not be a cauldron for those who devised mischief, but they would be brought forth out of the midst of it. The sword they feared would be brought upon them, and they would be delivered into the hands of strangers to execute judgment. They would fall by the sword in the border of the land, and it would be known that the judgments were according to the ways of the nations round about. As the words were being spoken, Pelasha the son of Benaiah died. The observer fell upon his face and cried with a loud voice, Ah, Lord, wilt thou make a full end of the remnant of Israel? The answer came with a promise for those who were far off among the nations. Though they had been cast far off and scattered among the countries, yet a little sanctuary would be provided for them in the lands where they should come. They would be gathered from the people and assembled out of the countries where they had been scattered, and the land of Israel would be given back unto them. They would come thither and take away all the detestable things and all the abominations. A new spirit would be put within them, and the stony heart would be taken out of their flesh, and a heart of flesh would be given, that they might walk in the statutes and keep the ordinances. The cherubims then lifted up their wings, and the wheels beside them, and the glory of the Creator went up from the midst of the city. The Spirit brought the man in a vision back into Chaldea, to them of the captivity, and the vision that had been seen went up. Then all the things that had been shown were spoken unto them of the captivity. The word came again, saying that the man dwelt in the midst of a rebellious house, which had eyes to see and saw not, and ears to hear and heard not. Therefore he was to prepare stuff for removing, and go forth by day in their sight. As one that removes for exile, he was to dig through the wall in their sight, and carry his stuff out upon his shoulders in the twilight, covering his face, so that he should not see the ground. This was to be a sign unto the house of Israel. He did as he was commanded. He brought forth his stuff by day, and in the even he digged through the wall with his hand, and brought it forth in the twilight. In the morning the word came asking, What doest thou? The answer was to be that this burden concerned the prince in Jerusalem and all the house of Israel. As the man had done, so it would be done unto them. They would go into captivity. The prince that was among them would bear his burden upon his shoulder in the twilight, and should go forth. They would dig through the wall to carry out thereby. He would cover his face. A net would be spread upon him, and he would be taken in the snare and brought to Babylon, to the land of the Chaldeans. Yet should he not see it, though he should die there. All that were about him to help him, and all his bands would be scattered toward every wind, and a sword would be drawn out after them. They would know the truth when they were dispersed in the countries. But a few men would be left from the sword, from the famine, and from the pestilence, that they might declare all their abominations. The man was also told to eat his bread with quaking and drink his water with trembling and with carefulness. This was a sign that the land would be desolate from all that was therein, because of the violence of all them that dwelt there. The cities that were inhabited would be laid waste, and the land would be a desolation. The proverb that was used in the land, saying, The days are prolonged, and every vision faileth, was to be made to cease. The days were at hand, and the effect of every vision. There would be no more any vain vision, nor flattering divination. The word that was spoken would come to pass, and would no more be prolonged. The house of Israel said that the vision was for many days to come, and for the times that were far off. But the word was that none of the words would be prolonged any more, but the word which was spoken should be done. Then the word came against the prophets of Israel that prophesied out of their own hearts. Woe unto the foolish prophets that followed their own spirit and had seen nothing. They were like the foxes in the deserts, and they had not gone up into the gaps, nor made up the hedge for the house of Israel to stand in the battle. They had seen vanity and lying divination, saying the word was given when it was not. Because they had spoken vanity and seen lies, the hand would be against the prophets. They would not be in the assembly of the people, nor written in the writing of the house of Israel, nor enter into the land. They had seduced the people, saying, "Peace," and there was no peace. When one built up a wall, behold, others daubed it with untempered mortar. The wall would fall when the overflowing shower came, and the great hailstones, and the stormy wind. The wall would be rent in the fury, and the foundation thereof would be discovered. The wall would be no more, neither they that daubed it, even the prophets of Jerusalem, which prophesied peace when there was no peace. The word came also against the daughters of the people who prophesied out of their own heart, sewing pillows to all armholes, and making kerchiefs upon the head of every stature to hunt souls. They had polluted the truth among the people for handfuls of barley and for pieces of bread, to slay the souls that should not die, and to save the souls alive that should not live, by their lying to the people that hear lies. Therefore the pillows would be torn from their arms, and the souls let go, even the souls that they hunted to make them fly. The kerchiefs would be delivered, and the people would be no more in their hand to be hunted, for they had made the heart of the righteous sad with lies, whom the Creator had not made sad, and strengthened the hands of the wicked. Certain of the elders of Israel came and sat before the man, and the word came, saying, "Son of man, these men have set up their idols in their heart, and put the stumbling block of their iniquity before their face. Should I be inquired of at all by them? Every man of the house of Israel that set up his idols in his heart, and came to the prophet, would be answered according to the multitude of his idols, that the house of Israel might be taken in their own heart, because they were all estranged through their idols. They were told to repent and turn themselves from their idols, and turn away their faces from all their abominations. If any man separated himself and set up idols, the face would be set against that man to make him a sign and a proverb. The land was warned that if it sinned by trespassing grievously, the stay of bread would be broken, and famine would be sent upon it to cut off man and beast. Though these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they should deliver but their own souls by their righteousness. If noisome beasts were caused to pass through the land to spoil it, so that it be desolate, though these three men were in it, they should deliver neither sons nor daughters, they only should be delivered. If a sword were brought upon that land, or a pestilence poured out in fury to cut off man and beast, though Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it, they should deliver but their own souls. How much more when the four sore judgments, the sword, the famine, the noisome beast, and the pestilence, were sent together upon Jerusalem. Yet behold, therein should be left a remnant that should be brought forth, both sons and daughters. They would come forth, and their way and their doings would be seen. There would be comfort concerning the evil that had been brought upon Jerusalem. It would be known that there was not a cause without reason for all that had been done in the city. The word then spoke of the vine tree among the trees of the forest. What is the vine tree more than any tree, or than a branch which is among the trees of the forest? Shall wood be taken thereof to do any work? Or will men take a pin of it to hang any vessel thereon? Behold, it is cast into the fire for fuel. The fire devours both the ends of it, and the midst of it is burned. Is it meet for any work? Behold, when it was whole, it was meet for no work. How much less shall it be meet yet for any work, when the fire has devoured it, and it is burned? Therefore, as the vine tree among the trees of the forest is given to the fire for fuel, so would the inhabitants of Jerusalem be given. The face would be set against them. They should go out from one fire, and another fire should devour them. The land would be made desolate because they had committed a trespass. The history was then recounted as a parable of an infant cast out in the open field, polluted in its own blood on the day it was born. No, I pitied it to do any of these things unto it, but it was cast out in the loathing of its person. When the presence passed by and saw the infant polluted in its own blood, the word was spoken, live. The infant was caused to multiply as the bud of the field, and it increased and waxed great, and came to excellent ornaments. When the time of love was come, the skirt was spread over it, and a covenant was entered into, and it became a possession. It was washed with water, and anointed with oil. It was clothed with broidered work, and shod with badger's skin, and girded about with fine linen, and covered with silk. It was decked with gold and silver, and the raiment was of fine linen and silk and broidered work. It ate fine flour and honey and oil, and it was exceeding beautiful, and prospered into a kingdom. The renown went forth among the nations for the beauty, for it was perfect through the comeliness which had been put upon it. But the trust was placed in the beauty, and the renown was played the harlot with, and the whoredoms were poured out on every one that passed by. Of the garments, high places were made, decked with divers colors. The fair jewels of gold and silver were taken and used to make images of men, and whoredom was committed with them. The broidered garments were used to cover them, and the oil and incense set before them. The meat also, the fine flour and oil and honey, was set before them for a sweet savor. Moreover, the sons and daughters were taken and sacrificed unto them to be devoured. The days of the youth were not remembered, when the person was naked and bare, polluted in blood. After all the wickedness, high places were built in every street and in every head of the way. The beauty was made to be abhorred, and the feet were opened to every one that passed by. Whoredom was committed with the Egyptians, the neighbors great of flesh, and with the Assyrians, and multiplied in the land of Canaan unto Chaldea. How weak was the heart, seeing all these things were done, the work of an imperious, whorish woman. In that, a prominent place was built in the head of every way, and an high place in every street, and was not as an harlot, in that the hire was scorned. The woman took strangers instead of her husband. To all harlots men give gifts, but she gave her gifts to all her lovers, and hired them that they might come unto her on every side for her whoredom. The contrary was in her from other women in her whoredoms, in that none followed her to commit whoredoms, and in that she gave a reward, and no reward was given unto her. Therefore, the word was that the lovers would be gathered, and the nakedness discovered unto them. Judgment would be rendered, as women that break wedlock and shed blood are judged, and blood would be given in fury and jealousy. The high places would be thrown down, and the garments stripped, and the fair jewels taken, leaving the person naked and bare. A company would be brought up against her, and she would be stoned with stones and thrust through with swords. The houses would be burned with fire, and judgments executed in the sight of many women. The whoredom would be made to cease, and no hire would be given any more. Thus the fury would be made to rest, and the jealousy would depart, and there would be quiet and no more anger, because the days of the youth were not remembered, but the Creator was fretted in all these things. The way would be recompensed upon the head. The proverb would be used against her, as is the mother, so is her daughter. She was the daughter of her mother, that loathed her husband and her children. The history continues by comparing the city to her sisters, Samaria and Sodom. It was said that Sodom, the younger sister, had not done as the daughter of Jerusalem had done, she nor her daughters. This was the iniquity of Sodom. Pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her, and in her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. They were haughty and committed abomination. Therefore they were taken away, as was seen good. Neither had Samaria committed half of the sins, but the abominations were multiplied more than theirs, justifying the sisters in all the things which had been done. Shame was to be borne for the judgment, because the sins were more abominable than theirs. Nevertheless, a turning of the captivity was promised, a bringing again of the captivity of Sodom and her daughters, and the captivity of Samaria and her daughters, along with the captivity of the remnant in the midst of them. This was so that shame might be borne, and confusion felt for all that had been done, in that they were a comfort unto them. When the sisters and their daughters should return to their former estate, then the daughter of Jerusalem and her daughters would return to theirs. The sister Sodom was not mentioned by the mouth in the day of pride, before the wickedness was discovered, as at the time of the reproach of the daughters of Syria, and all that are round about her. The covenant of the youth would be remembered, and an everlasting covenant would be established. Then the ways would be remembered, and the soul would be ashamed, when the sisters, the elder and the younger, were received, and they would be given for daughters, but not by the old covenant. The covenant would be established, and it would be known who had spoken. This was so that the mouth might be opened no more because of the shame, when the presence was pacified toward the people for all that they had done. The word then came again, posing a riddle and speaking a parable unto the house of Israel concerning two great eagles and a vine. A great eagle with great wings, long-winged, full of feathers, which had divers colors, came unto Lebanon and took the highest branch of the cedar. He cropped off the top of his young twigs and carried it into a land of traffic. He set it in a city of merchants. He took also of the seed of the land and planted it in a fruitful field. He placed it by great waters and set it as a willow tree. And it grew and became a spreading vine of low stature, whose branches turned toward him, and the roots thereof were under him. So it became a vine, and brought forth branches, and shot forth sprigs. There was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers. Behold, this vine did bend her roots toward him, and shot forth her branches toward him, that he might water it by the furrows of her plantation. It was planted in a good soil by great waters, that it might bring forth branches, and that it might bear fruit, that it might be a goodly vine. The question was asked, shall it prosper? Shall he not pull up the roots thereof, and cut off the fruit thereof, that it wither? It shall wither in all the leaves of her spring, even without great power or many people to pluck it up by the roots thereof. Yea, behold, being planted, shall it prosper? Shall it not utterly wither when the east wind touches it? It shall wither in the furrows where it grew. The interpretation was given. The king of Babylon was come to Jerusalem, and had taken the king thereof and the princes thereof, and led them with him to Babylon. He had taken of the king's seed, and made a covenant with him, and had taken an oath of him. He had also taken the mighty of the land, that the kingdom might be base, that it might not lift itself up, but that by keeping of his covenant it might stand. But he rebelled against him in sending his ambassadors into Egypt, that they might give him horses and much people. Shall he prosper? Shall he escape that does such things? Or shall he break the covenant and be delivered? As surely as the sun rises, in the place where the king dwells that made him king, whose oath he despised, and whose covenant he broke, even with him in the midst of Babylon he shall die. Neither shall Pharaoh with his mighty army and great company make for him in the war, by casting up mounts and building forts, to cut off many persons, seeing he despised the oath by breaking the covenant, when, lo, he had given his hand, and has done all these things. He shall not escape. The trespass would be recompensed upon his own head. A net would be spread upon him, and he would be taken in the snare and brought to Babylon to be pleaded with for his trespass. All his fugitives with all his bands would fall by the sword, and they that remained would be scattered toward all winds. But a promise followed the judgment. The highest branch of the high cedar would be taken and set. A tender one would be cropped off from the top of his young twigs and planted upon an high mountain and eminent. In the mountain of the height of Israel would it be planted, and it shall bring forth boughs and bear fruit and be a goodly cedar. And under it shall dwell all fowl of every wing, in the shadow of the branches thereof shall they dwell. All the trees of the field would know that the high tree had been brought down, and the low tree exalted. The word came again, addressing the proverb used in the land of Israel, saying, "The fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge." It was declared that this proverb would no longer be used. All souls belong to the source, as the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son is mine. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. But if a man be just, and do that which is lawful and right, and has not eaten upon the mountains, neither has lifted up his eyes to the idols, nor has defiled his neighbor's wife, and has not oppressed any, but has restored to the debtor his pledge, and has spoiled none by violence, he is just, he shall surely live. If he beget a son that is a robber, a shedder of blood, that does the like to any one of these things, shall he then live? He shall not live. He has done all these abominations. He shall surely die. His blood shall be upon him. Now, lo, if he beget a son that sees all his father's sins which he has done, and considers, and does not such like, he shall not die for the iniquity of his father. He shall surely live. As for his father, because he cruelly oppressed and spoiled his brother by violence, he shall die in his iniquity. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither shall the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. If the wicked will turn from all his sins that he has committed, and keep all the statutes, and do that which is lawful and right, he shall surely live, he shall not die. All his transgressions that he has committed, they shall not be mentioned unto him. In his righteousness that he has done he shall live. Have I any pleasure at all that the wicked should die, and not that he should return from his ways and live? But when the righteous turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity, shall he live? All his righteousness that he has done shall not be mentioned. In his trespass that he has trespassed, and in his sin that he has sinned, in them shall he die. The history of the house of Israel continues with a challenge to the people's sense of justice. They say that the way is not equal, yet the word returns to them. Is it not their own ways that are unequal? When a righteous man turns away from his righteousness and commits iniquity, he dies in it for the trespass he has done. But when the wicked man turns away from his wickedness and does that which is lawful and right, he shall save his soul alive, because he considers and turns away from all his transgressions. He shall surely live. The house of Israel is called to repent and turn from all their transgressions, so that iniquity shall not be their ruin. A new heart and a new spirit are promised to those who cast away their transgressions. For there is no pleasure in the death of him that dieth. A lamentation was then taken up for the princes of Israel. What was the mother? A lioness. She lay down among lions. She nourished her whelps among young lions. She brought up one of her whelps, and it became a young lion, and it learned to catch the prey. It devoured men. The nations also heard of him. He was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains unto the land of Egypt. Now when she saw that she had waited, and her hope was lost, then she took another of her whelps, and made him a young lion. He went up and down among the lions. He became a young lion, and learned to catch the prey, and devoured men. He knew their desolate palaces, and he laid waste their cities. Then the nations set against him on every side from the provinces, and spread their net over him. He was taken in their pit. They put him in ward in chains, and brought him to the king of Babylon. They They brought him into holds, that his voice should no more be heard upon the mountains of Israel. The mother was like a vine in the blood, planted by the waters. She was fruitful and full of branches by reason of many waters. She had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule, and her stature was exalted among the thick branches. But she was plucked up in fury. She was cast down to the ground, and the east wind dried up her fruit. Her strong rods were broken and withered. The fire consumed them. Now she is planted in the wilderness, in a dry and thirsty ground. A fire is gone out of a rod of her branches, which has devoured her fruit, so that she has no strong rod to be a scepter to rule. This is a lamentation, and shall be for a lamentation. In the 7th year, in the 5th month, the 10th day of the month, certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire, and sat before the man. But the word was that the presence would not be inquired of by them. The history of the people was to be caused to be known. From the day they were chosen in the land of Egypt, and the hand was lifted up unto them to bring them forth into a land flowing with milk and honey. They were told to cast away every man the abominations of his eyes, and not defile themselves with the idols of Egypt. But they rebelled and would not hearken. They did not every man cast away the abominations. Then it was said that fury would be poured out upon them in the midst of the land of Egypt. But for the sake of the name, that it should not be polluted before the heathen, they were brought forth out of the land of Egypt and into the wilderness. Statutes were given and judgments shown, which if a man do, he shall even live in them. Also, the Sabbaths were given to be a sign between the Creator and the people, that they might know who sanctifies them. But the house of Israel rebelled in the wilderness. They walked not in the statutes, and they despised the judgments, and the Sabbaths they greatly polluted. Then it was said that the fury would be poured out in the wilderness to consume them. But again, for the sake of the name, they were not destroyed in the sight of the heathen. Yet the hand was lifted up in the wilderness, that they would not be brought into the land which had been given, because they despised the judgments and walked after their idols. Nevertheless, the eye spared them from destruction. The children were warned not to walk in the statutes of their fathers, nor observe their judgments, nor defile themselves with their idols. The children also rebelled. They walked not in the statutes, neither kept the judgments. They polluted the Sabbaths. Then it was said the fury would be poured out upon them in the wilderness. But the hand was withdrawn for the sake of the name. The hand was lifted up unto them in the wilderness, that they would be scattered among the heathen and dispersed through the countries, because they had not executed the judgments. When they were brought into the land, and they saw every high hill and all the thick trees, then they offered there their sacrifices and presented the provocation of their offering. They were asked, "What is the high place whereunto ye go?" And the name thereof is called Bama unto this day. The house of Israel was asked if they would pollute themselves after the manner of their fathers. As for the thought that they would be as the heathen, as the families of the countries, to serve wood and stone, it would not be. with a mighty hand, and with a stretched out arm, and with fury poured out, rule would be maintained over them. They would be brought into the wilderness of the people, and there would the pleading be face to face, as it was in the wilderness of the land of Egypt. They would be caused to pass under the rod, and be brought into the bond of the covenant. The rebels would be purged out, and they should not enter into the land of Israel. For the house of Israel, in the holy mountain, in the mountain of the height of Israel, there should all the house of Israel serve. There would the offerings be accepted, and the firstfruits, with all the holy things. They would be accepted with a sweet savor when they were brought out from the people and gathered out of the countries. It would be known who had spoken when the land of Israel was reached. There the ways and the doings would be remembered, and they would loathe themselves in their own sight for all the evils that they had committed. It would be known that the dealings were for the sake of the name, and not according to the wicked ways. The word then turned toward the south, toward the forest of the south field. A prophecy was given to the forest of the south. Hear the word, behold, I will kindle a fire in thee, and it shall devour every green tree in thee, and every dry tree. The flaming flame shall not be quenched, and all faces from the south to the north shall be burned therein. All flesh would see that the fire was kindled and would not be quenched. But the observer said, Ah, Lord God, they say of me, doth he not speak parables? The weight of the vision was often dismissed as a story, yet the reality of the fire remained at the door. The word came again, directing the face toward Jerusalem and the holy places. A prophecy was given against the land of Israel. Behold, I am against thee, and will draw forth my sword out of his sheath, and will cut off from thee the righteous and the wicked. Because the righteous and the wicked were both to be removed, the sword would go forth against all flesh from the south to the north. It would be known that the sword had been drawn and would not return any more. The man was told to sigh with the breaking of his loins and with bitterness before their eyes. When they asked, Wherefore sighest thou? The answer was to be for the tidings, because it was coming. Every heart would melt, all hands would be feeble, and every spirit would faint. A sword is sharpened and also furbished. It is sharpened to make a sore slaughter. It is furbished that it may glitter. Should there then be mirth? The rod of the sun is despised, as every tree. The sword was given to be furbished, that it might be handled. It was sharpened and furbished to be given into the hand of the slayer. A cry and a howl were commanded, for the sword was to be upon the people, and upon all the princes of Israel. Terrors by reason of the sword would be upon the people, therefore the thigh was to be smitten. It was a trial, and what if the sword even despised the rod? It would be no more. The hands were to be smitten together, and the sword doubled the third time. The sword of the slain was to enter into the privy chambers. The heart would faint, and the ruins would be multiplied at all the gates. The sword was made bright and wrapped up for the slaughter. Go thee one way or other, either on the right hand or on the left, whithersoever thy face is set. The hands would be smitten together, and the fury caused to rest. The word then told the man to appoint 2 ways for the sword of the king of Babylon to come, Both ways were to come forth out of one land. A signpost was to be made at the head of the way to the city. One way was for the sword to come to Rabbah of the Ammonites, and the other to Judah in Jerusalem, the defenced. The king of Babylon stood at the parting of the way, at the head of the two ways, to use divination. He made his arrows bright. He consulted with images. He looked in the liver. At his right hand was the divination for Jerusalem, to appoint captains, to open the mouth in the slaughter, to lift up the voice with shouting, to appoint battering rams against the gates, to cast a mount, and to build a fort. To the people, it would seem as a false divination in their sight, to them that had sworn oaths. But he would call to remembrance the iniquity, that they might be taken. Because the transgression was discovered, and the sins appeared in all the doings, they would be taken with the hand. And thou, profane, wicked prince of Israel, whose day is come, when iniquity shall have an end. Thus said the word: remove the diadem, and take off the crown. This shall not be the same. Exalt him that is low, and abase him that is high. An overthrow would be made. It would be no more, until he come whose right it is, and it would be given him. A prophecy was also given concerning the Ammonites and their reproach. The sword was drawn for the slaughter. It was furbished to consume because of the glittering. While they saw vanity and divined lies, the sword would be brought upon the necks of them that were slain, of the wicked, whose day was come. The sword was to return into his sheath. The judgment would be in the place where they were created, in the land of their nativity. Indignation would be poured out, and the fire of wrath blown against them. They would be delivered into the hand of brutish men, skillful to destroy. They would be for fuel to the fire. The blood would be in the midst of the land. They would be no more remembered. The word came again, asking, wilt thou judge? Wilt thou judge the bloody city? Yea, thou shalt show her all her abominations. The city shed blood in the midst of it, that her time might come, and made idols against herself to defile herself. She had become guilty in the blood shed, and defiled in the idols made. The days were drawn near, and the end of the years was come. Therefore she was made a reproach unto the heathen, and a mocking to all countries. Those that were near and those that were far off would mock her, as being infamous and much vexed. In her, the princes of Israel, every one were in her to their power to shed blood. In her they set light by father and mother. In the midst of her they dealt by oppression with the stranger. In her they vexed the fatherless and the widow. The holy things were despised, and the Sabbaths profaned. In her were men that carried tailies to shed blood, and in her they ate upon the mountains and committed lewdness. The nakedness of the father was discovered in her. They humbled her that was set apart for pollution. One committed abomination with his neighbor's wife, and another lewdly defiled his daughter-in-law, and another humbled his sister, his father's daughter. In her they took gifts to shed blood. Usury and increase were taken, and the neighbors greedily gained by extortion, and the source was forgotten. Therefore the hand was smitten at the dishonest gain, and at the blood which had been in the midst. Can thine heart endure? or can thine hands be strong in the days that I shall deal with thee? The people would be scattered among the heathen and dispersed in the countries, and the filthiness consumed. The word spoke of the house of Israel becoming dross. All they were brass and tin and iron and lead in the midst of the furnace. They were even the dross of silver. As they gathered silver and brass and iron and lead and tin into the midst of the furnace, to blow the fire upon it to melt it, so would they be gathered in anger and in fury, and left there to melt. Yea, they would be gathered and blown upon in the fire of wrath, and they would be melted in the midst thereof. As silver is melted in the midst of the furnace, so would they be melted, and it would be known that the fury had been poured out. The land was not cleansed, nor rained upon in the day of indignation. There was a conspiracy of her prophets in the midst thereof, like a roaring lion ravening the prey. They had devoured souls. They had taken the treasure and precious things. They had made her many widows in the midst thereof. Her priests had violated the law and profaned the holy things. They had put no difference between the holy and profane. Neither had they showed difference between the unclean and the clean, and had hid their eyes from the Sabbaths. Her princes in the midst thereof were like wolves ravening the prey, to shed blood and to destroy souls, to get dishonest gain. Her prophets had daubed them with untempered mortar, seeing vanity and divining lies. The history of the two sisters, Ahala and Ahalibah, was spoken as a parable of two cities. Ahala represented Samaria, and Ahalibah represented Jerusalem. They were the daughters of one mother, and in their youth they committed themselves to the ways of the nations. Ahala doted on her neighbors, the Assyrians, who were clothed in blue, captains and rulers, all of them desirable young men, horsemen riding upon horses. She bestowed her favor upon them and defiled herself with all their idols. But the very ones she doted upon were turned against her. The Assyrians discovered her nakedness, took her sons and her daughters, and slew her with the sword. She became a byword among women, for judgment had been executed upon her. When her sister Ahalibah saw this, she became even more corrupt in her inordinate love and in her whoredoms than her sister. She doted upon the Assyrians also, and when she saw men portrayed upon the wall, the images of the Chaldeans portrayed with vermilion, girded with girdles upon their loins, exceeding in dyed attire upon their heads, all of them princes to look to. She doted upon them as soon as her eyes saw them. She sent messengers unto them into Chaldea, and the Babylonians came to her into the bed of love. But her mind was soon alienated from them, just as the mind of the visitor was alienated from her sister. She multiplied her whoredoms, remembering the days of her youth in the land of Egypt. Because the mind was alienated, the lovers would be raised up against her from every side. The Babylonians and all the Chaldeans, Pekod and Shoa and Koa, and all the Assyrians with them, all of them desirable young men, great lords and renowned, all of them riding upon horses. They would come against her with chariots, wagons, and wheels, and with an assembly of people, which should set against her buckler and shield and helmet round about. The judgment would be set before them, and they would judge according to their customs. Jealousy would be set against her, and they would deal furiously. They would take away the nose and the ears, and the remnant would fall by the sword. They would take the sons and the daughters, and the residue would be devoured by the fire. They would also strip the clothes and take away the fair jewels. Thus the lewdness would be made to cease, and the whoredom brought from the land of Egypt, so that the eyes would no longer be lifted up to them. She would be delivered into the hand of them whom she hated, and they would deal with her hatefully, taking away all her labor and leaving her naked and bare, because she had gone after the heathen and was polluted with their idols. She would drink of her sister's cup, a cup deep and large. It would be a cup of astonishment and desolation, filled with drunkenness and sorrow. The word then turned to the boiling pot, a parable given in the 9th year, in the 10th month, on the 10th day of the month, the very day the king of Babylon set himself against Jerusalem. Set on a pot, set it on, and also pour water into it. Gather the pieces thereof into it, even every good piece, the thigh and the shoulder. Fill it with the choice bones. The choice of the flock was to be taken, and the bones burned under it. It was to boil well, that the bones might be seethed in the midst of it. Woe to the bloody city, to the pot whose scum is therein, and whose scum is not gone out of it. It was to be brought out piece by piece. Let no lot fall upon it. For her blood was in the midst of her. She set it upon the top of a rock. She poured it not upon the ground, to cover it with dust, that it might cause fury to come up to take vengeance. The blood was set upon a top of a rock, that it should not be covered. Therefore, the pile for fire would be made great. Heap on wood, kindle the fire, consume the flesh, and spice it well, and let the bones be burned. Then the empty pot was to be set upon the coals thereof, that the brass of it might be hot and burn, and that the filthiness of it might be molten in it, that the scum of it might be consumed. She had wearied herself with lies, and her great scum went not forth out of her. In the filthiness was lewdness, because she was not purged when the purging was offered. She should not be purged from her filthiness any more, until the fury had been caused to rest upon her. The word had been spoken, and it would come to pass. It would be done. There would be no going back, no sparing, and no repenting. According to the ways and according to the doings, she would be judged. Then a word of a different kind came to the man. Son of man, behold, I take away from thee the desire of thine eyes with a stroke. Yet neither shalt thou mourn nor weep, neither shall thy tears run down. He was to forbear crying and make no mourning for the dead. He was to bind the tire of his head upon him, and put on his shoes upon his feet, and cover not his lips, and eat not the bread of men. So he spoke unto the people in the morning, and at even his wife died. And he did in the morning as he was commanded. The people asked, Wilt thou not tell us what these things are to us, that thou doest so? The answer was that the sanctuary, the excellency of their strength, and the desire of their eyes would be profaned. Their sons and their daughters, whom they had left, would fall by the sword. And they would do as the man had done. They They would not mourn nor weep, but they would pine away for their iniquities and mourn one toward another. The man was to be a sign unto them. According to all that he had done, they would do. When this came, they would know who had spoken. Also, in the day when their strength and the joy of their glory were taken away, he that escaped in that day would come unto the man to cause him to hear it with his ears. In that day, the mouth of the man would be opened to him which was escaped, and he would speak and be no more dumb. The word then turned against the nations that had rejoiced in the fall of the city, against the Ammonites, who said, Aha, against the sanctuary when it was profaned, and against the land of Israel when it was desolate, because they clapped their hands and stamped their feet and rejoiced in heart with all despite against the land of Israel. The hand would be stretched out upon them. They would be delivered for a spoil to the heathen, and cut off from the people, and destroyed out of the countries. Moab and Seir, who said that the house of Judah was like unto all the heathen, would also face judgment. The side of Moab would be opened from the cities, and it would be given to the men of the east for a possession. Edom, which had dealt against the house of Judah by taking vengeance, would see the hand stretched out to cut off man and beast, and it would be made desolate from Teman to Dedan. The history of the judgment turns toward the great merchant city of the sea, Tyrus, because she said against Jerusalem, Aha, she is broken that was the gates of the people. I shall be replenished. Now she is laid waste. The word came against her with the weight of the deep. Many nations would be brought up against Tyrus, as the sea causes his waves to come up. They would destroy the walls and break down her towers. The very dust would be scraped from her, and she would be made like the top of a rock. She would be a place for the spreading of nets in the midst of the sea, for she had become a spoil to the nations. Her daughters, which were in the field, would be slain by the sword, and the strength of her wealth would sink into the waters. The king of Babylon, Nebuchadrezzar, would come from the north, a king of kings, with horses, and with chariots, and with horsemen and companies, and much people. He would slay with the sword the daughters in the field, and make a fort against the city, and cast a mount, and lift up the buckler. He would set engines of war against the walls, and break down the towers with his axes. By reason of the abundance of his horses, their dust would cover the city. The walls would shake at the noise of the horsemen, and of the wheels, and of the chariots, when he should enter into the gates, as men enter into a city wherein is made a breach. The strong garrisons would go down to the ground, and the riches would be made a spoil. They would break down the walls and destroy the pleasant houses. They would lay the stones and the timber and the dust in the midst of the water. The noise of the songs would be caused to cease, and the sound of the harps would be no more heard. Tyrus would be made like the top of a rock, a place to spread nets upon. She would be built no more, for the word had been spoken. The isles would shake at the sound of the fall, when the wounded should cry, and the slaughter should be made. Then all the princes of the sea would come down from their thrones, and lay away their robes, and put off their broidered garments. They would clothe themselves with trembling, and sit upon the ground. they would take up a lamentation, saying, "How art thou destroyed, that wast inhabited of seafaring men, the renowned city, which wast strong in the sea." Now the isles would tremble in the day of the fall, yea, the isles that were in the sea would be troubled at the departure. For the city would be made desolate, like the cities that are not inhabited, when the deep should be brought up, and great waters should cover her. She would be brought down with them that descend into the pit, with the people of old time, and set in the low parts of the earth, in places desolate of old. She would be a terror, and should be no more, though she were sought for, yet should she never be found again. The word then commanded a lamentation for Tyrus, describing her as the one who sat at the entry of the sea, a merchant of the people for many isles. She had said, "I am of perfect beauty." Her borders were in the midst of the seas, and her builders had perfected her beauty. They had made all her ship boards of fir trees of Senir. They had taken cedars from Lebanon to make masts. Of the oaks of Bashan had they made her oars. The company of the Ashurites had made her benches of ivory, brought out of the isles of Chittim. Fine linen with broidered work from Egypt was that which was spread forth to be her sail. Blue and purple from the isles of Elisha was that which covered her. The inhabitants of Sidon and Arvad were her mariners, her wise men were her pilots. The ancients of Jebel and the wise men thereof were her calkers. All the ships of the sea with their mariners were in her to occupy her merchandise. They of Persia and of Lud and of Phut were in her army, her men of war. They hanged the shield and helmet in her. They set forth her comeliness. The men of Arvad with her army were upon the walls round about, and the Gammadims were in her towers. They hanged their shields upon her walls round about. They made her beauty perfect. Tarshish was her merchant by reason of the multitude of all kind of riches, with silver, iron, tin, and lead. They traded in her fairs. Javan, Tubal, and Meshech, they were her merchants. They traded the persons of men and vessels of brass in her market. They of the house of Togarmah traded in her fairs with horses and horsemen and mules. The men of Dedan were her merchants. Many isles were the merchandise of her hand. They brought her for a present horns of ivory and ebony. Syria was her merchant by reason of the multitude of the wares of her making. They occupied in her fairs with emeralds, purple, and broidered work, and fine linen, and coral, and agate. Judah and the land of Israel, they were her merchants. They traded in her market wheat of Minnith, and Panag, and honey, and oil, and balm. Damascus was her merchant in the multitude of the wares of her making, for the multitude of all riches, in the wine of Helbon, and white wool. Dan also and Javan going to and fro occupied in her fairs. Bright iron, cassia, and calamus were in her market. Dedan was her merchant in precious clothes for chariots. Arabia and all the princes of Kedar, they occupied with her in lambs and rams and goats. The merchants of Sheba and Ramah, they were her merchants. They occupied in her fairs with chief of all spices, and with all precious stones and gold. Haran and Caneh and Eden The merchants of Sheba, Asshur, and Chilmed were her merchants. These were her merchants in all sorts of things, in blue clothes and broidered work, and in chests of rich apparel, bound with cords and made of cedar. The ships of Tarshish did sing of her in her market, and she was replenished and made very glorious in the midst of the seas. But the rowers had brought her into great waters. The east wind had broken her in the midst of the seas. Her riches and her fares, her merchandise, her mariners and her pilots, her calkers, and the occupiers of her merchandise, and all her men of war, and all her company, should fall into the midst of the seas in the day of her ruin. The suburbs should shake at the sound of the cry of the pilots. All that handled the oar, the mariners, and all the pilots of the sea should come down from their ships and stand upon the land. They should cause their voice to be heard against her, and should cry bitterly, and should cast up dust upon their heads, and wallow themselves in the ashes. They should make themselves utterly bald for her, and gird them with sackcloth, and weep with bitterness of heart and bitter wailing. In their wailing they should take up a lamentation. What city is like Tyrus, like the destroyed in the midst of the sea? When her wares went forth out of the seas, she filled many people. She enriched the kings of the earth with the multitude of her riches. In the time when she should be broken by the seas in the depths of the waters, her merchandise and all her company in the midst of her should fall. All the inhabitants of the isles should be astonished, and their kings should be sore afraid. They should be troubled in their countenance. The merchants among the people should hiss at her. She should be a terror, and never should be any more. The word then spoke to the prince of Tyrus, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a god. I sit in the seat of God, in the midst of the seas, yet thou art a man, and not God, though thou set thine heart as the heart of God. Behold, he was wiser than Daniel, and no secret was hid from him. The history of the prince of Tyrus continues with the weight of his own wisdom. By his great power and by his traffic, he had increased his riches, and his heart was lifted up because of his wealth. Therefore, the strangers, the terrible of the nations, were brought against him. They would draw their swords against the beauty of his wisdom, and they would defile his brightness. He would be brought down to the pit, and die the deaths of them that are slain in the midst of the seas. He was asked if he would yet say, I am God, before him that slew him, when he was but a man, and no God in the hand of him that wounded him. He would die the deaths of the uncircumcised by the hand of strangers, for the word had been spoken. A lamentation was then taken up for the king of Tyrus, who was called the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. He had been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was his covering: the sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of his tabrets and of his pipes was prepared in the day that he was created. He was the anointed cherub that covers, set upon the holy mountain of God. He walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. He was perfect in his ways from the day that he was created, until iniquity was found in him. By the multitude of his merchandise, they filled the midst of him with violence, and he sinned. Therefore, he was cast as profane out of the mountain of God, and the covering cherub was destroyed from the midst of the stones of fire. His heart was lifted up because of his beauty, and he corrupted his wisdom by reason of his brightness. He was cast to the ground and laid before kings, that they might behold him. He had defiled his sanctuaries by the multitude of his iniquities, and by the iniquity of his traffic. Therefore, a fire was brought forth from the midst of him, which devoured him, and turned him to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that beheld him. All they that knew him among the people were astonished. The word then turned toward Sidon, saying, Behold, I am against thee, O Sidon, and I will be glorified in the midst of thee. Pestilence and blood would be sent into her streets, and the wounded would be judged in the midst of her by the sword upon her on every side. There would be no more a pricking briar unto the house of Israel, nor any grieving thorn of all that were round about them, when the house of Israel was gathered from the people among whom they were scattered, and the presence was sanctified in them in the sight of the heathen. Then they would dwell in their land that was given to the servant Jacob. They would dwell safely therein, and build houses, and plant vineyards. In the 10th year, in the 10th month, in the 12th day of the month, the word came against Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He was called the great dragon that lies in the midst of his rivers, which had said, My river is mine own, and I have made it for myself. But hooks were to be put in his jaws, and the fish of his rivers would stick unto his scales. He would be brought up out of the midst of his rivers, and all the fish of his rivers would stick unto his scales. He would be left thrown into the wilderness, him and all the fish of his rivers. He would fall upon the open fields, and not be brought together nor gathered. He was given for meat to the beasts of the field, and to the fowls of the heaven. All the inhabitants of Egypt would know who had spoken, because they had been a staff of reed to the house of Israel. When they took hold of the staff by the hand, it broke and rent all their shoulder, and when they leaned upon it, it broke and made all their loins to be at a stand. Therefore, a sword would be brought upon Egypt to cut off man and beast. The land of Egypt would be desolate and waste, because he had said, The river is mine, and I have made it. The land would be made utterly waste and desolate, from the tower of Sin even unto the border of Ethiopia. No foot of man would pass through it, nor foot of beast, nor would it be inhabited 40 years. The cities of Egypt would be desolate in the midst of the cities that are laid waste, and her cities among the cities that are wasted would be desolate 40 years. The Egyptians would be scattered among the nations and dispersed through the countries. But at the end of 40 years, the Egyptians would be gathered from the people whither they were scattered. The captivity of Egypt would be brought again, and they would return into the land of Pathros, into the land of their habitation, and they would be their abase kingdom. It would be the basest of the kingdoms, neither would it exalt itself any more above the nations. for they would be diminished, that they should no more rule over the nations. It would be no more the confidence of the house of Israel, which brought their iniquity to remembrance when they looked after them. In the 27th year, in the 1st month, in the 1st day of the month, the word came saying that Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon, caused his army to serve a great service against Tyrus. Every head was made bald, and every shoulder was peeled. Yet had he no wages, nor his army for Tyrus, for the service that he had served against it. Therefore the land of Egypt would be given unto him. He would take her multitude, and take her spoil, and take her prey, and it would be the wages for his army. He had wrought for the truth in doing so. In that day, the horn of the house of Israel would be caused to bud forth, and the opening of the mouth would be given in the midst of them. The word came again, Howl ye, woe worth the day. For the day was near, even the day of the cloud. It would be the time of the heathen. The sword would come upon Egypt, and great pain would be in Ethiopia, when the slain should fall in Egypt, and they should take away her multitude, and her foundations should be broken down. Ethiopia and Libya and Lydia, and all the mingled people, and Chub, and the men of the land that is in league, would fall with them by the sword. They that uphold Egypt would fall, and the pride of her power would come down. They would be desolate in the midst of the countries that are desolate. Fire would be set in Egypt when the helpers were destroyed. In that day, messengers would go forth in ships to make the careless Ethiopians afraid, and great pain would come upon them as in the day of Egypt. The multitude of Egypt would be made to cease by the hand of Nebuchadrezzar. He and his people with him, the terrible of the nations, would be brought to destroy the land. They would draw their swords against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. The rivers would be made dry, and the land sold into the hand of the wicked. The land would be made waste, and all that is therein, by the hand of strangers. The history continues with the silence of the idols. The word was spoken that the images would be destroyed, and the idols made to cease out of Noph. There would be no more a prince of the land of Egypt, and a fear would be put in the heart of the country. Pathros would be made desolate, and fire would be set in Zoan, and judgments executed in No. The fury would be poured out upon Sin, the strength of Egypt, and the multitude of No would be cut off. When the fire was kindled, Sin would have great pain, and No would be rent asunder, and Noph would have distresses daily. The young men of Avon and of Pibezeth would fall by the sword, and the cities would go into captivity. At Tehaphnes also the day would be darkened. When the yokes of Egypt were broken there, the pomp of her strength would cease, and a cloud would cover her, and her daughters would go into captivity. Thus were the judgments executed. In the 11th year, in the 1st month, in the 7th day of the month, the word came saying that the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had been broken. And lo, it had not been bound up to be healed, to put a roller to bind it, to make it strong to hold the sword. Therefore, the arm that was strong would be broken, and the sword would be caused to fall out of his hand. The Egyptians would be scattered among the nations and dispersed through the countries. The arms of the king of Babylon would be strengthened, and the sword put in his hand, but the arms of Pharaoh would fall down. They would know who had spoken when the sword was put into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he should stretch it out upon the land of Egypt. In the 11th year, in the 3rd month, in the 1st day of the month, the word came to speak unto Pharaoh and to his multitude, Whom art thou like in thy greatness? Behold, the Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon with fair branches, and with a shadowing shroud, and of an high stature, and his top was among the thick boughs. The waters made him great, the deep set him up on high, with her rivers running round about his plants. His height was exalted above all the trees of the field, and his boughs were multiplied, and his branches became long because of the multitude of waters when he shot forth. All the fowls of heaven made their nests in his boughs, and under his branches did all the beasts of the field bring forth their young, and under his shadow dwelt all great nations. Thus was he fair in his greatness, in the length of his branches, for his root was by great waters. The cedars in the garden of God could not hide him. The fir trees were not like his boughs, and the chestnut trees were not like his branches. Nor any tree in the garden of God was like unto him in his beauty. He was made fair by the multitude of his branches, so that all the trees of Eden that were in the garden of God envied him. But because his heart was lifted up in his height, and he had shot up his top among the thick boughs, he was delivered into the hand of the mighty one of the heathen. He was driven out for his wickedness. Strangers, the terrible of the nations, cut him off and left him. Upon the mountains and in all the valleys his branches were fallen, and his boughs were broken by all the rivers of the land, and all the people of the earth went down from his shadow and left him. Upon his ruin shall all the fowls of the heaven remain, and all the beasts of the field shall be upon his branches. This was so that none of all the trees by the waters should exalt themselves for their height, nor shoot up their top among the thick boughs, neither their trees stand up in their height, all that drink water. For they are all delivered unto death, to the nether parts of the earth, in the midst of the children of men, with them that go down to the pit. In the day when he went down to the grave, a mourning was caused. The deep was covered for him, and the floods were restrained, and the great waters were stayed. And Lebanon was made to mourn for him, and all the trees of the field fainted for him. The nations were made to shake at the sound of his fall, when he was cast down to hell. All the trees of Eden, the choice and best of Lebanon, all that drink water, would be comforted in the nether parts of the earth. They also went down into hell with him unto them that be slain with the sword, and they that were his arm, that dwelt under his shadow in the midst of the heathen. To whom was Pharaoh like in glory and in greatness among the trees of Eden? Yet should he be brought down with the trees of Eden unto the nether parts of the earth. He should lie in the midst of the uncircumcised with them that be slain by the sword. This is Pharaoh and all his multitude, for the word had been spoken. In the 12th year, in the 12th month, In the first day of the month, a lamentation was taken up for Pharaoh. He was like a young lion of the nations, and he was as a whale in the seas. And he came forth with his rivers, and troubled the waters with his feet, and fouled their rivers. A net would be spread over him with a company of many people, and they should bring him up in the net. He would be left upon the land, and cast forth upon the open field, and all the fowls of the heaven would remain upon him, and the beasts of the whole earth would be filled with him. His flesh would be laid upon the mountains, and the valleys filled with his height. The land would be watered with his blood, even to the mountains, and the rivers would be full of him. When he was put out, the heaven would be covered, and the stars thereof made dark. The sun would be covered with a cloud, and the moon would not give her light. All the bright lights of heaven would be made dark over him, and darkness set upon the land. The hearts of many people would be vexed when the destruction was brought among the nations, into the countries which they had not known. Yea, many people would be amazed, and their kings would be horribly afraid when the sword was brandished before them. And they would tremble at every moment, every man for his own life, in the day of the fall. The sword of the king of Babylon would come upon him. By the swords of the mighty would the multitude be caused to fall, the terrible of the nations, all of them. And they should spoil the pomp of Egypt, and all the multitude thereof should be destroyed. All the beasts thereof would be destroyed from beside the great waters, neither should the foot of man trouble them any more, nor the hoofs of beasts trouble them. Then would the waters be made deep, and the rivers caused to run like oil, when the land of Egypt was made desolate, and the country destitute of that whereof it was full. Then would they know who had spoken. The history of the fall continues in the low places of the earth. In the 12th year, on the 15th day of the month, a lamentation was cast over the multitude of Egypt, and they were delivered into the nether parts of the earth with them that go down into the pit. The question was asked of the pride of the nation, "Whom dost thou pass in beauty?" They were told to go down and be laid with the uncircumcised, for they should fall in the midst of them that are slain by the sword. The strong among the mighty would speak to him out of the midst of hell with them that help him. They are gone down, they lie uncircumcised, slain by the sword of the conqueror. Asshur was there, and all her company, her graves were round about her, all of them slain, fallen by the sword. Her graves were set in the sides of the pit, and her company was round about her grave, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, which caused terror in the land of the living. Elam was there, and all her multitude round about her grave, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, which were gone down uncircumcised into the nether parts of the earth. They had caused their terror in the land of the living, yet they bore their shame with them that go down to the pit. A bed was set for her in the midst of the slain, with all her multitude. Her graves were round about him, all of them uncircumcised, slain by the sword. Meshech, Tubal, and all her multitude were there. Her graves were round about him, all of them uncircumcised, slain by the sword, though they caused their terror in the land of the living. They should not lie with the mighty that are fallen of the uncircumcised, which are gone down to hell with their weapons of war. They have laid their swords under their heads, but their iniquities shall be upon their bones, though they were the terror of the mighty in the land of the living. Yea, thou shalt be broken in the midst of the uncircumcised, and shalt lie with them that are slain with the sword. There is Edom, her kings, and all her princes, which with their might are laid by them that were slain by the sword. They should lie with the uncircumcised, and with them that go down to the pit. There be the princes of the north, all of them, and all the Zidonians, which are gone down with the slain. With their terror they are ashamed of their might, and they lie uncircumcised with them that be slain by the sword, and bear their shame with them that go down to the pit. Pharaoh should see them, and should be comforted over all his multitude, even Pharaoh, and all his army slain by the sword. For the terror had been caused in the land of the living. And he should be laid in the midst of the uncircumcised with them that are slain with the sword, even Pharaoh and all his multitude. For the word had been spoken. The word came again, addressing the Son of Man as a watchman. If the watchman sees the sword come upon the land and blows the trumpet to warn the people, then hears the sound of the trumpet and takes not warning, if the sword comes and takes him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him. But he that takes warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman sees the sword come and blows not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword comes and takes any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will be required at the watchman's hand. So the man was set as a watchman unto the house of Israel. He was to hear the word and warn them. When it was said unto the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die, if the watchman did not speak to warn the wicked from his way. Kagu enus, wicked man should die in his iniquity, but his blood would be required. Nevertheless, if the wicked was warned of his way to turn from it, if he did not turn from his way, he should die in his iniquity. But the watchman had delivered his soul. The house of Israel spoke, saying, If our transgressions and our sins be upon us, and we pine away in them, how should we then live? The answer was that there is no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. The people were told to turn from their evil ways, for why would they die? The righteousness of the righteous should not deliver him in the day of his transgression. And as for the wickedness of the wicked, he should not fall thereby in the day that he turns from his wickedness. When it was said to the righteous that he should surely live, if he trusted to his own righteousness and committed iniquity, all his righteousnesses should not be remembered, but for his iniquity that he had committed, he should die for it. Again, when it was said unto the wicked, Thou shalt surely die, if he turned from his sin and did that which was lawful and right, if the wicked restored the pledge and gave again that he had robbed, he should surely live. None of his sins that he had committed should be mentioned unto him. He had done that which was lawful and right. He should surely live. Yet the children of the people said, The way of the Lord is not equal but it was their way which was not equal. When the righteous turned from his righteousness and committed iniquity, he should even die thereby. But if the wicked turned from his wickedness and did that which was lawful and right, he should live thereby. In the 12th year of the captivity, in the 10th month, in the 5th day of the month, one that had escaped out of Jerusalem came, saying, "The city is smitten." Now the hand had been upon the man in the evening, before he that was escaped came, and the mouth had been opened, and he was no more dumb. Then the word came, saying that they that inhabit those wastes of the land of Israel spoke, saying, "Abraham was one, and he inherited the land. But we are many, the land is given us for inheritance." But they were asked if they should possess the land while they ate with the blood, and lifted up their eyes toward their idols, and shed blood. They stood upon their sword, and worked abomination, and defiled every one his neighbor's wife. And should they possess the land? As surely as the sun shines, they that were in the wastes should fall by the sword. Him that was in the open field would be given to the beasts to be devoured, and they that were in the forts and in the caves should die of the pestilence. For the land would be laid most desolate, and the pomp of her strength should cease, and the mountains of Israel should be desolate, that none should pass through. Then should they know who had spoken, when the land was laid most desolate because of all their abominations. Also the children of the people still were talking against the man by the walls and in the doors of the houses, saying one to another, "Come, I pray you, and hear what is the word that cometh forth." They came as the people come, and they sat before him as the people, and they heard the words, but they would not do them. With their mouth they showed much love, but their heart went after their covetousness. And lo, the man was unto them as a very lovely song of one that has a pleasant voice, and can play well on an instrument. For they heard the words, but they did them not. And when this comes to pass, lo, it will come, then shall they know that a prophet has been among them. The word came again against the shepherds of Israel, who fed themselves, and not the flock. Should not the shepherds feed the flocks? They ate the fat, and clothed themselves with the wool, and killed them that were fed, but they fed not the flock. The diseased had they not strengthened, neither had they healed that which was sick, nor bound up that which was broken. The shepherds of Israel had not sought that which was lost, but with force and with cruelty had they ruled them. The flock was scattered because there was no shepherd, and they became meat to all the beasts of the field. My sheep wandered through all the mountains, and upon every high hill. Yea, my flock was scattered upon all the face of the earth, and none did search or seek after them. Therefore, the word was against the shepherds. The flock would be required at their hand, and they would be caused to cease from feeding the flock. Neither should the shepherds feed themselves any more. The sheep would be delivered from their mouth, that they might not be meat for them. Behold, the search for the sheep would be taken up, and they would be sought out. As a shepherd seeks out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered, so would the sheep be sought and delivered out of all places where they had been scattered in the cloudy and dark day. They would be brought out from the people and gathered from the countries, and brought to their own land, and fed upon the mountains of Israel by the rivers. They would be fed in a good pasture, and upon the high mountains of Israel should their fold be. There should they lie in a good fold, and in a fat pasture shall they feed. The lost would be sought, and the broken bound up, and the sick strengthened. But the fat and the strong would be destroyed. They would be fed with judgment. As for the flock, they were judged between cattle and cattle, between the rams and the he-goats. Was it a small thing to have eaten up the good pasture? But they must tread down with their feet the residue of the pastures, and to have drunk of the deep waters, but they must foul the residue with their feet. The flock had to eat that which had been trodden, and drink that which had been fouled, because the diseased had been thrust with side and with shoulder, and pushed with horns till they were scattered abroad. Therefore the flock would be saved, and they should no more be a prey. One shepherd would be set over them, and he should feed them, even the servant David, he should feed them, and he should be their shepherd. A covenant of peace would be made, and the evil beasts caused to cease out of the land, and they should dwell safely in the wilderness, and sleep in the woods. The places round about the hill would be made a blessing. The shower would come down in his season. There should be showers of blessing. The tree of the field should yield her fruit, and the earth should yield her increase, and they should be safe in their land. The bands of their yoke would be broken, and they should no more be a prey to the heathen. They should no more be consumed with hunger in the land, neither bear the shame of the heathen any more. Thus should they know that the presence was with them, and that they, even the house of Israel, were the people. And ye my flock, the flock of my pasture, are men, and I am your God. The word then turned toward Mount Seir, saying, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against thee, and I will stretch out mine hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. The cities would be laid waste because of the perpetual hatred. And because the children of Israel had been shed by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, because it was said, These two nations and these two countries shall be mine, and we will possess it, whereas the presence was there. Therefore the judgment would be according to the anger, and according to the envy shown in the hatred against them. It would be known that all the blasphemies which were spoken against the mountains of Israel, saying, They are laid desolate, they are given us to consume, had been heard. With the mouth, great things had been boasted against the truth. When the whole earth rejoiced, Seir would be made desolate, as there was rejoicing over the inheritance of the house of Israel, because it was desolate. So would it be done unto Mount Seir and all Idumea. The mountains of Israel were told to hear the word, because the enemy had said against them, Aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. And because they had been made desolate and swallowed up on every side, therefore the prophecy was given. The mountains and the hills and the rivers and the valleys and the desolate wastes and the cities that were forsaken, which became a prey and derision to the residue of the heathen, would be spoken for. Surely in the fire of jealousy had the word been spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, which had appointed the land into their possession, with the joy of all their heart. The mountains of Israel would shoot forth their branches and yield their fruit to the people of Israel, for they were at hand to come. The land would be tilled and sown, and men would be multiplied upon it. All the house of Israel, even all of it, and the cities should be inhabited, and the wastes should be builded. Man and beast would be multiplied, and they would settle after the old estates, and more good would be done unto them than at the beginnings. Yea, men would be caused to walk upon the mountains, and they should possess the land, and it should be their inheritance. And the mountains should no more henceforth bereave them of men. When the house of Israel dwelt in their own land, they defiled it by their own way and by their doings. Therefore, fury was poured upon them for the blood they had shed upon the land, and for their idols wherewith they had polluted it. They were scattered among the heathen and dispersed through the countries. And when they entered unto the heathen, they profaned the holy name, when it was said of them, These are the people of the Lord, and are gone forth out of his land. But there was pity for the holy name. Therefore it was said unto the house of Israel, I do not this for your sakes, O house of Israel, but for mine holy name's sake. The name would be sanctified among the heathen, which had been profaned in the midst of them. The people would be taken from among the heathen, and gathered out of all countries, and brought into their own land. Then would clean water be sprinkled upon them, and they should be clean. From all filthiness and from all idols should they be cleansed. A new heart also would be given, and a new spirit put within them. And the stony heart would be taken out of the flesh, and a heart of flesh given. The Spirit would be put within them, and cause them to walk in the statutes, and they should keep the judgments, and do them. The hand was upon the man once more, and he was carried out in the Spirit, and set down in the midst of a valley, which was full of bones. He was caused to pass by them round about, and behold, there were very many in the open valley, and lo, they were very dry. The question was asked, Son of man, can these bones live? The answer was, O Lord, thou knowest. Then the command was given to prophesy upon these bones, and say unto them, O ye dry bones, hear the word. Breath would be caused to enter into them, and they should live. Sinews would be laid upon them, and flesh brought up, and skin covered over them, and breath put in them, and they should know who had spoken. As the prophecy was spoken, there was a noise, and behold a shaking, and the bones came together, bone to his bone. When the eyes beheld, lo, the sinews and the flesh came up upon them, and the skin covered them above, but there was no breath in them. Then the word said, Prophesy unto the wind, prophesy, Son of man, and say to the wind, Thus saith the Lord, Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. So the prophecy was spoken as commanded, and the breath came into them, and they lived, and stood up upon their feet, an exceeding great army. These bones were the whole house of Israel. They said, Our bones are dried, and our hope is lost. But the word was that the graves would be opened, and the people caused to come up out of their graves, and brought into the land of Israel. The Spirit would be put in them, and they should live, and be placed in their own land. The man was then told to take one stick, and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel his companions. The sticks were to be joined one to another into one stick, and they should become one in the hand. When the people asked what these things meant, they were told that the tribes would be gathered and made one nation in the land upon the mountains. One king should be king to them all, and they should be no more two nations, neither should they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. Neither should they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. They would be cleansed, and they would be the people, and the presence would be their God. David, the servant, should be king over them, and they all should have one shepherd. They would walk in the judgments and observe the statutes. They would dwell in the land that was given unto Jacob, even they and their children, and their children's children forever. A covenant of peace would be made with them. It would be an everlasting covenant. They would be multiplied, and the sanctuary set in the midst of them forevermore. The tabernacle also would be with them. Yea, the presence would be their God, and they should be the people. And the heathen should know that the name sanctifies Israel, when the sanctuary should be in the midst of them forevermore. The word then turned toward Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. He would be turned back, and hooks put into his jaws, and brought forth with all his army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya would be with them. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters. They would come like a storm and cover the land like a cloud in the latter years. They would think an evil thought to go up to the land of unwalled villages, to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates. They would come to take a spoil and to take a prey. But in that day, when Gog should come against the land of Israel, the fury would come up. There would be a great shaking in the land of Israel, the fishes of the sea, and the fowls of the heaven, and the beasts of the field, and all creeping things, and all the men upon the face of the earth should shake. The mountains would be thrown down, and the steep places would fall, and every wall would fall to the ground. A sword would be called for against him throughout all the mountains. Every man's sword would be against his brother. Pestilence and blood would plead against him, and it would rain upon him, and upon his bands, and upon the many people that were with him, an overflowing rain, and great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. Thus the greatness and the holiness would be magnified in the eyes of many nations. The bows would be smitten out of the left hand, and the arrows caused to fall out of the right hand. He would fall upon the mountains of Israel, he and all his bands, and the people that were with him. He would be given unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. A place of burial would be given in Israel, the valley of the passengers on the east of the sea. There should they bury Gog and all his multitude, and they shall call it the valley of Hamon-Gog. 7 months should the house of Israel be burying of them, that they may cleanse the land. The fowls and the beasts were called to the sacrifice, to eat the flesh of the mighty, and drink the blood of the princes of the earth. Thus would the glory be set among the heathen, and all the heathen should see the judgment that was executed in the 25th year of the captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month. The hand was upon the man, and brought him into the land of Israel. He was set upon a very high mountain, by which was as the frame of a city on the south. A man was there, whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a line of flax in his hand and a measuring reed. He stood in the gate. The man said, Son of man, behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, and set thine heart upon all that I shall show thee. Behold, a wall on the outside of the house round about, and in the man's hand a measuring reed of 6 cubits long. He measured the breadth of the building and the height. He went to the gate which looks toward the east, and measured the threshold, and the little chambers, and the porch. Every part was measured with precision: the posts, the arches, the windows, and the palm trees carved upon the posts. He brought him into the outward court, and to the north gate, and the south gate, and measured them according to the same measures. He brought him to the inner court, and to the tables where they washed the burnt offering, and to the chambers of the singers. Finally, he brought him to the temple, and measured the posts and the breadth of the tabernacle. The glory of the Creator came from the way of the east, and his voice was like a noise of many waters, and the earth shined with his glory. The glory entered into the house by the way of the gate whose prospect is toward the east. The Spirit took the man up and brought him into the inner court, and behold, the glory of the house was filled. The place of the throne was shown, where the dwelling would be in the midst of the children of Israel forever. Afterward, he brought him again unto the door of the house, and behold, waters issued out from under the threshold of the house eastward. The waters came down from under the right side of the house, at the south side of the altar. The man with the line went forth eastward and measured 1,000 cubits, and he brought the observer through the waters. The waters were to the ankles. Again he measured 1,000, and brought him through the waters. The waters were to the knees. Again he measured 1,000, and the waters were to the loins. Afterward he measured 1,000, and it was a river that could not be passed over, for the waters were risen, waters to swim in. By the bank of the river were very many trees on the one side and on the other. These waters go down into the desert, and go into the sea, which being brought forth into the sea, the waters shall be healed. Everything that lives and moves, whithersoever the river shall come, shall live. And there shall be a very great multitude of fish, because these waters shall come thither. By the river upon the bank thereof, on this side and on that side, shall grow all trees for meat, whose leaf shall not fade, neither shall the fruit thereof be consumed. It shall bring forth new fruit according to his months, because their waters they issued out of the sanctuary. And the fruit thereof shall be for meat, and the leaf thereof for medicine. The borders of the land were set, and the portions of the tribes. And the name of the city from that day shall be, The Lord is there.